1965, trying to find some place to settle. See? And this Pan-African thing, I was instinctively drawn to it, and I found a lot of instructive elements in its philosophy, like bringing man together, fair exchange. I made it from Salisbury in southern Rhodesia up to Bulawayo, where I met Joshua Nkomo in a little village up there. The black people in Rhodesia had nothing. They were denied everything. And to some extent, that hasn't changed today. Someone took they say 24 million acres of land. They took 34 million acres of land and shared it up between 100 white men. Now, if you call that justice, British or otherwise, that's just an appalling state. And that's why the struggle took place. They had to fight. There was no way that they could not fight. They were fighting for their very survival. I'm talking about guys who were going out there sitting in the bush for days, sometimes weeks, waiting for a redneck South African to come by so they can put a bullet in his head, because it was fraught with dangerous circumstances. I went as an observer, but I got involved, if you like. It was impossible not to have gotten involved, and it, in some respects, was a rather stupid thing to do, because some of the African brethren didn't understand who I was and what my purpose was, and they referred to me as an expat, if you like. You don't speak my language. I said, well, hell, you don't speak mine. I said, you have to get some socialist elementary education that will make you recognize your brother. And if he's willing to participate in what is your army or your insurrection, you embrace him. Whilst I was in Rhodesia, I toyed with the idea that, look, I'm going to stay here. But I thought this fight needed to be transferred someplace else. I wanted to take that fight to the very hub. And the very hub of that paganism, if you like, was Britain, was England. Coming back to London was indeed a revelation for me, because I then saw this almost dense cloud of blackness, brownness, black poor people, white poor people, some who were anti-black people. That was something else we had to deal with. But I live my life as though I'm walking on a sea of glass, and any day that sheet of glass will break. But the thing for me is that rare persuasion that drives a man. And what I found in England when I come back from Rhodesia, I found men actually driven by a sense of rarity, moral rarity. But it was rage. It wasn't about actually wanting to kill somebody, to cause more widows and orphans. It wasn't that kind of rage. It was a rage that wanted to change the world. And we found people like Brother Matthews down by Hyde Park, man with no hands. We met people like Reen Webb, all RAF men. People like Skinny Wretch, like Whiskers, like Big Froggy and Small Froggy. I mean, these are real people. Okay, some of them were old men by now, but they all came together and we joined in that Black Power experiment. Yeah, Portno Road, We've had 2 mass demonstrations up against police brutality, and the police station is just down there. They would arrest people here in the center of the street, take you down there, and beat the living cane out of you. But the demonstration took place from here all the way over to Kilburn Park Road, and it was ferocious. And in 1966, 67 in Britain, I was in a wilderness place. A land that lacked the milk of human kindness, if you like, that black cohesion and understanding. You understand? It was desperate. Anyone in Great Britain was subject from 1822 to be charged with being a suspicious person. Amen, amen, amen. S-U-S, sus, a suspicious person. In other words, in a place where it was designated you had no right to be. I was arrested for sus in Ledbrook Grove, 100 feet from where we had our family home. Left home at 6 o'clock in the morning, and 5 minutes past 6, I was in a police car. What are you doing out here this time in the morning? He said, I'm going to work. And P.C. Skinner, niggers don't work, niggers don't work. I said, well, this nigger works, you know. Then they drove up on the pavement and said, you ever been arrested before for sus? I said, no, well, you are now, you know, and they took me to the police station, gave me 3 months in jail, and I haven't committed an offense, not yet. And that's the plight of 17,000, 13, 15, 14,000 other black men in this country having committed no offense. And when you lock up innocents, I think you've perhaps heard me say this before, you turn a saint into a raging lunatic. Amen. In '68, I decided to make some speeches up and down the length and breadth of this country. But the one that came to the attention of the British authorities, the Home Office, the speech I made with regard to Joshua Nkomo, which the newspapers interpreted in this country as being a speech about Black Britain's call to shoot white Britons. We didn't advocate that. What I said was that if black people are going to be continually murdered in Rhodesia, perhaps we'd better start thinking about revenge in the streets of Great Britain. That might entail killing some white people. Every time 10 black men die in Salisbury, Rhodesia, then perhaps you ought to have 10 white men that ought to die in Great Britain. And it was words like that there. It's spoken off the top of my head because we were angry, you understand. And I didn't see that the European man ought to have a monopoly on shooting black men in Africa or elsewhere, wherever you choose to shoot him. And I came up with that sort of thing. And I was again in the process of being hunted. Lord, they hunted for me in Brixton. They hunted for me. I mean, they ran out of places to hunt for me in England. It's another frightening period because jail was staring me in the face. I mean, I had to go on the ground for a long time with 5 or 6 other guys. You couldn't show your face out there because they had special branch people looking for you everywhere.
I can recall my brother and I rummaging through briefcases that we were not supposed to touch, that presumably contained things that we were not supposed to see. There were references to a person, and of course at that time, I was unaware of who this person was. I knew I would say to my brother, or my brother would say to me, who is this Kingsley Tweed? Why does Daddy have these newspaper clippings? As long as I have known my father, I knew him as Bruce King. And it was an awakening when I discovered that that was the alias and that his real name was Kingsley Tweed.
I took all the big blows. Now I'm saying thank you, Lord, and I'm playing and singing this song for you.
My family is made up of myself, an older brother, Nigel, younger sister, Malawi, my mother, Ann, and my father.
We were conscious that there were some people who had, and there were others who did not have.
That if you were hungry, you could always get something to eat, not that we always had a lot.
So they came to our house, in season and out of season, for food and just to talk. Black people, white people. A hungry man is a hungry man. A child in need of milk needs milk.
We were surprised when we found out that other people's homes were not like our home.
And because this is just a meal for one here, Had I known I was going to have 4, I would have used a rain barrel, you know? But every time you damn greedy Bermudians come up my house, you know, what you gonna cook? What you gonna cook? You understand? You that buy Williams and my other brothers inside there, don't bring them here no more. Make this the first and last time, okay? And I warn you in my house. Go home and cook your own food. Okay. I mean, that's really completed, actually. There comes a time when there's joy and there's no peace. There comes a time when there's joy and there's peace. That's why I'm singing my song.
At the time, my father was a cabinet maker, carpenter, builder. On the weekends, he used to play at a bar. As I grew and became more conscious, and as I began to look at and become more aware of the plight of black people in Britain, I developed in me a thirst to know. And I believed that my father knew what I needed to know. And so I would often look forward to those times when we could discuss things, and I was particularly interested in his participation. And so he would often make allusions to. I remember arguing with Malcolm about Africa before he went to Mecca. And I'd say, wow, he knew Malcolm? Or I'd say, Daddy, I came across a book, J.A. Rogers. And, oh, yes, I remember going to J.A. Rogers' house in Harlem. He knew J.A. Rogers? And over time, more and more pieces were filled in, and we became, I would like to think, dialogue partners.
Mother was out working for J. Lyons for £7 a week, and father was probably unemployed. And there were all of these children in the street, no education, turned out of school. And they were streaming schools, so that was pretty bad. And we decided to do something about that. And one would have thought the government would have applauded our efforts because we were instinctively drawn to black children. But then we discovered that living in a community that was 100% in fact white, we couldn't just really cater for black children. And so we took on board this total community, made it a community effort. And so the Community Action Center was designed to, increase the possibilities for education, technical training, further education. We set up a committee and we wrote a constitution and we were registered as a charity. We had some 3,000 young men and women come through our doors from 1974, when we started the construction of the building, until 1993.
I can remember watching him lay down the concrete floors. I was there while they were mixing the cement. I was there while he was orchestrating people. He was a major contributor to the building of what was the first building that I know of in London or even England that was built by black people from the ground up. And it existed with its sister building, the Teamwork Training Trust. The Teamwork building was where they used to train mechanics to fix automobiles and that kind of thing. And the Community Action Center was where they trained people in carpentry, electronics, and building, and that kind of thing. For a time period, my father had disconnected himself from the Community Action Center because of differences he had with some of the people that were running it. But when the building got in trouble and they were getting ready to lose the building, they always knew where to come and find my father. And so it was on one such occasion that they finally, a delegation, I imagine, came again to our home, pleading with my father to come back and help them save the building. And it was under those circumstances that he then returned to the CAC building. And so it was during this period that the Amenities Trust performed a coup d'etat that enabled them to seize control of the Teamwork Training Trust building. And shortly after that time, they attempted to do the same thing with the Community Action Center. And my father would work on putting together the case to defend and keep the Community Action Center for the community.
He went to court.
We became experts in the appeal process. And we would be up all night writing briefs, and we would have to hand deliver the briefs to various parties, and we would have to struggle to find the money to pay to file for these briefs. And my father would do all of this out of his pocket. We had no legal aid, no assistance from the community. It was almost as if the black community had resigned itself to just losing the building. And so when he would get jobs and other people would get paid, the portion of the money that should have gone to him was gone to pay the lights on the building. The money that should have gone to him was gone to pay to file a legal brief. So often he was left without money and without real sustenance, simply because he had a commitment and he refused to allow the Amenities Trust to either treat him or us or treat that building, which was the bastion of blackness in Ladbroke Grove, in the sense that it represented a symbol of independence. And in many ways, it is the classic struggle of David and Goliath. And even though they subsequently took the building, I would say that the battle isn't over, and people need to remember that David had 5 stones and we've only used a few.
I started the AME Church in 1959 in Britain with the Reverend Witter right over there in Peckham Rye.
And that represented either the first or one of the first AME churches that was established in England. When I expressed a commitment to go into the ministry, my father decided that we would start a church. So we sought out a Dr. Jacobs over in Wandsworth, in Battersea, and we tried to join with him and worship with him, and he had a small, fledgling, dying kind of congregation that wasn't going anywhere.
When I left there, we had about 45 barefoot black people coming in there, say, we found a man who could play a piano and sing like that, and folk just joined the church. Hallelujah time over there.
When my father and I started, there was just my father and I. In 1988, Bishop Vernon Bird was assigned at the General Conference to the 16th Episcopal District, of which London is a part. As it happened, Bishop Bird and my father go back to Bermuda days. By the time Bishop Bird came, we had around 250 or 300 members in the church that we started with him and I. 2 years later,
there was a law in London, England, which says that a preacher of another country cannot be ordained unless that institution which he belongs owned a church building.
We have some pictures
Right.
of one of your visits, and it was in a building called the Community Action Center.
It was the Kingsley Tree building. And that's why I tried to tell him to use that as our passport into England.
Anyway, he ordained me, had the ceremony in the church, and it was a glad time, and that's when Nicholas was ordained.
his commitment to growth would outweigh any selfish inclinations that he might have. And out of the 250 or 300 members that we had, my father created 9 other congregations.
And of course, the brethren, you know, got angry. Who the hell is he? How the hell can he organize 9 churches within a few years? But that's what I did.
As in most things, when somebody sees something that looks like it's progressive and productive, everybody wants to have a piece, and there's always a danger that it can be pulled apart.
The AME Church has let itself down. I haven't let it down because, you know something? Those brothers haven't added to what we built up out there.
To his detriment, rather than engage in a selfish and futile power struggle with no power. It's like dogs fighting over a bone without a bone. Withdrew and said, well, look, you have 9 congregations with people in it. But if all you want to do is fight, then you go ahead and I'm going to step back and let you go and do it, but I'm going to go do the work. And so even after that, he went and continued and continues to set up churches.
I'm sad because there's a perfectly good building and it ought to be used for the worship of black people. We just want to purchase the property before one of the Sikh congregations come by and say, yeah, we got a big edifice in South Hampstead. Because we know that we can fill this place up with 340,500 people.
So even despite some of the shortcomings and some of the other things that were taking place, he has continued in his commitment to the AME Church.
So far, when I look back, it's like awesome wonder. You know that thing about I see the stars? You know, I hear this thing calling, you know, God, your awesome wonder. And I wonder how I got over, you know? And it's the things that I retrieve from way back there that keeps me busy and active and reflective.
Mr. Kings, you need to come on to settle things like this. This should be your #1 interest now. Because Bermuda is a totally different place. You can virtually go anywhere we like now. So, but Bermuda is still very much under control by the same powers that be from the economic standpoint. The only thing that we have been able to remove one of the legs of power that they have, which is the political power. But you should deal with your personal issue because that's the #1 thing. Because, and I quoted something to him that I always remember, said, to thine own self be true. And being true to yourself, then it'll be difficult for you to be false to anybody else. You've got to be true to yourself.
This invitation from the PLP, which is not the first time, incidentally, that they've invited me to Bermuda. I'm going on a pilgrimage, you know, so it's not perhaps as political as might first appear, my arriving during this election. So I'm availing myself of the opportunity that they've presented me.
Yeah. What are you doing down this, sweetheart? I'm clearing my garden. But when I want something doing properly, I do it myself.
Take a picture of the dog because it's the last time you'll be seeing him, man. I'm gonna sell him to a Korean man.
Yeah? My dog runs every time he sees you. Get off.
In fact, I may have a meal with Sunday before I leave.
Yeah.
Meal a dog.
Leave my dog alone.
Sell him to the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, I'll fucking sell you Chinese, not my bloody dog. They get more meat from you. My dog's that big.
This is an uncultured lady, forgive her.
No, I don't know where they got him from.
Koreans, son, they love dogs. Okay, see you later. Huh? I'll bring you back a bottle of something when I come back. I don't touch the stuff myself. And please take out the bit of...
Oh, you ain't, have you?
Yes, of course we got it. But for me, it's not going to the PLP or castigate the UBP or anybody else. I'm just going on a mission. Nervous? Hell no, not really. Apprehensive? Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Because I've got a simple, solid story to tell. Bye for now. Oh, no. Listen, I really don't need any instructions about those people. Believe me.
Come on, go speak to them. Hey, you got the granddaughter, Uncle Kingsley. The granddaughter. That's your granddaughter. Karen's daughter. That's his granddaughter. Take a picture. Yeah. Want me to keep it? Once you got a picture of his granddaughter. And Barbara. Get on it. Chase sweetie.
Go see it.
What did he say? Greg Kingsley.
Coming back to Bermuda wasn't clear until just a couple of days ago. He would tell you, I decided I wasn't coming anyhow, but having spoke to Carlton and people like that, he said, well, Teddy, give it a try, you know. And I knew it was going to be a raw, sticky, stinking moment that turns you inside out. You know, like a buttercup. Turns you out. Hey there, little baby sister.
Baby sister, are you fight?
Big girl.